The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. This is the Agile Coaching Network. My name is Ray Arell. I'm one of the hosts of this monthly get-together to talk about Agile practices, Agile coaching, all things around the Agile universe. The Agile Coaching Network, if you're not familiar with this, is that this is your first time on this call. We run things a little bit differently than just a normal kind of webinar. This is really about a conversation between those of us who joined the live event and really discussing the things that are kind of top of mind in the community that's going on around that word called Agile. We are brought to you by the Agile Alliance. Agile Alliance is a nonprofit organization that's been in existence since the dawn of the manifesto. So if you can kind of picture, the scene of 2001 where, the big monolith appears. Well, our monolith was the Agile Manifesto when it was written, and that actually set into motion later that there would be, millions of people who actually apply themselves and call themselves to some Agile roles, a part of an Agile team, and it has literally transformed the industry. By no means are we done in that whole transformation, because as you know, for those of us that have been working in Agile for a long period of time, we still have a lot of things that we need to go figure out and help people through to either create an environment, an Agile environment within their organization. It's a complex issue, and the Agile Alliance being out there has helped us with great sessions that would have just what passed by with the Agile 2022. If you're an Agile Alliance member, and I think even some of those will go just to the general population as well, but you can go look at, the replays of the things that were recorded, and you can just go take a look at them. They're pretty good. Also, they've got just 20 years worth of history there, 20 years worth of Agile development. The cost for you, if you actually join the Agile Alliance, is merely $49 for an individual membership. And I can tell you, having been a longtime member of the Agile Alliance, it's well worth it to one, for myself, just as a coach, learning up on Agile, but also the ability for you to help to fund a really great mission of a nonprofit as well. So I strongly recommend that you go take a look at them. I am joined by a cast of regulars, co-hosts. We're all hosting together here on this environment. And this has been the first time in a while that we have the full crew that's here. And I got really excited when I saw the joins that were happening on the staff side. But we have, Shauna, Hendrik, Jorg, Deanna, and of course myself here, which means that we're going to have a stunning start off to the conversation. Our purpose in the very beginning, when we actually open up the conversation, is that we are sort of the conversation starters within any of the topics that we bring through. The goal is to amplify the learnings that we have. It's sort of giving back to the community. This is episode 71, and it's hard to believe that we've been doing this for this long, but still, it's great to be here each month, and we want to basically, again, amplify the learning that we have, and to be able to help others who are crossing into the space of Agile and Agile adoption space. What I would like to start off and talk about today, and it was interesting because I had an interesting month, and this was kind of a combination of one. I was recovering from COVID this month, so I actually was reading a little bit more, kind of digging in a little bit deeper into some of the things that we teach. And then I was also thinking about some of the things that, in contrast, what we as Agile coaches are trying to evolve companies for. And as if people have ever read about, Teal Organizations, which is something that a number of our Agile coaches go off and teach. At the lowest level, if you think of from the red all the way up to the teal, a red team is very impulsive. It's sort of the equivalent of a metaphor. It's a wolf pack, top-down authority, division of labor, but very much alphas are running organizations, really really coming down heavy about this is the way that we do things. At the amber level, which is the sort of the metaphor for that is the armed forces of the Army, formal roles, stable processes, those things come into the wiring when you're looking at an amber team. An orange team, which is, from an achievement base, and I spent 30 years in a company that was very achiever based orange organization, but it's very meritocracy, accountability, innovation. But it was very mechanistic like in the way that it operated as an organization. When we get up into the green, we get more into, the metaphor for that, from a pluralistic side, you're thinking about family, you're thinking about, stakeholder value, you're thinking about, empowerment of the collective that you have. And then finally, the teal, which is the living organism, which, as you know, living organisms evolve as necessary in order to go and grow as a necessity in order to survive. And that evolutionary process helps through a process of either self-organization, or overall looking at the collective whole of what we're doing. And that includes, if we think from an Agile perspective, from another view of this, the Agile Manifesto really, if you read through it, ends up being in this sort of that living organization teal space. A lot of the things that you see in there about how do we bring together and look at the potential of what we have and the needs that we're trying to go satisfy with our stakeholders and our customers. And the goal is that the collective of the organization goes off and helps to move on this. What's kind of interesting, though, is that as I was thinking about, because I teach a lot of SAFe, I teach a lot of LESS, I teach a lot of Scrum, I teach a lot of Scrum at scale. I've done that for a number of different years. But there is a very much, when I see Scrum teams coming into existence, it is very machine-like. Implement these rituals, and these artifacts are in place and others. And it's really a turn the crank in a very mechanistic type of model in a lot of regards. And sometimes teams forget that we're trying to actually, from an organization perspective, that we should be actually behaving more like a teal organization in that case. I saw a couple of online models that sort of showed like the bottoms of the organization should be behaving more like teal, but they also still had sort of, well, maybe the Army model, a hybrid of the way different teams work within the organization is you might have the executive office running more like, the Army model, and then the middle of the organization, working sort of at, not at a teal level, but they're working sort of more towards the machine, and then, the ground level sort of expectations in the teal space. I'm just going to skip through to the question at this point, and I'd like to know, identify whether or not your company is more like a wolf pack, Army, machine, living organism. The next one is that as a coach, what are you coaching your teams to be? Are you trying to coach them towards a living organism? Are you trying to coach them towards a machine? Are you trying to move them someplace where they're not? And I'm kind of curious on how you're trying to move them to that space. And then the last one is, how and why would you move a team to being teal? And is that necessary for successful Agile? Let's go ahead and get the conversation going on this. Hendrik, what is your opinion on that?
I have actually a bit of a problem with this whole model, because for me, these Wolfpack, Army, Machine, Family, Living organism, it is very stereotypical, and it's helpful as a labeling to get some orientation, but most organizations I know are actually a mix of these things. And there is another thing that is important here, in my opinion, and that is agility on a company level, on a business level, means you need to be contextual with your agility, which means depending on what you're working on, you need to find different approaches. And I come back to my fit for purpose scheme again. If you are more like a factory lean kind of operation, then maybe an Army machine metaphor works actually pretty well, because it's the right thing to do. It's not a problem, as long as you keep the door open to have this also as a living organism once it's needed. So I think you need a mix of all these things. And that is a bit what I'm trying to do with my coaches. We are trying to coach the teams to do the right thing in the right moment, also to organize themselves when they have the right context to self-organize, but also give them a lot of guidance, sometimes even in an army style, if that is needed in the current situation. So I would not say that I want to move the team to Teal. I rather think that as an organization, we need to learn to embrace the whole thing. With one exemption, maybe Wolfpack is, in my opinion, not really one of the things I want to work in. And I don't know, nowadays with the complexity that we see in the business environment, Wolfpack is not a helpful pattern anymore. So this is a bit my thinking at the moment.
Okay, so you think that the wolf pack is unhealthy, or what would be the reason why you wouldn't want to move them towards a wolf pack?
Wolf packs suppress that ideas are getting heard from people. So even an army has some command chain, and there is something going up and down even in the hierarchy. So there is a feedback. A wolf pack is there are a few wise people in the center, so to speak, and they determine how things are done. And that's not, such a company cannot survive in today's complex business environment, because things are changing and you cannot have the wisdom in one place only.
Yeah, thank you for that. Shauna, what contrast do you want to put on this?
I think what Hendrik brought up was spot on. So, we are focused on lean at our organization. So it's all about sort of, being efficient, reducing waste, ensuring that there's accountability, and that kind of looks like it's more at the machine layer. I do feel that it's interesting because well, let me take a step back. So we were an organization that grew 300% in 2 years. So there was a lot of just like getting people onboarded, making it effective and efficient as possible. And it was a startup growing into an enterprise. So there was a lot of growing of all things. So if you think about some of the constraints that an organization has, things like, okay, on the HR side, we're going to start putting reviews and 9-box and goal setting. All of a sudden, those are starting to build constraints around, managers being accountable for their people. And then on the budget side, as you start breaking out headcount per leader, all of a sudden that makes those people theirs, right? So outside of the teams themselves, there's these constraints that get built into the organization that really start building these structures in place to make things more orange, amber, and red. So I guess for me, it's about having a healthy balance and not going too far, because if everything is being decided upon by upper management, you may be trying to try to build out a lean organization that may mimic something like a machine, but it goes too far, and all of a sudden, before you know it, there's a wolf pack, right? So I think continuing to have the conversation, as Hendrik said, especially at the business agility level, to figure out how do we make decisions, and if we have a value-driven culture, what are our values, and do we continue to go back to those? Do we have goals, and do we have the teams innovate on the outcomes that we're trying to drive, or are they being told to them? And so I think it's really checks and balances there as well.
Thank you for that. Deanna.
The way that I think about this is through the lens of leadership and through the lens of the Agile Fluency model, of course. And so when people ask me about the Agile Fluency model, they're constantly saying, well, what zone is my organization in? And my response is always, this isn't an organizational model, it's a team model. And so when I think about the idea of wolf pack, army, machine, family, living organisms, all of the zones in the Agile Fluency model are intended to be maybe in the late machine, but then family and living organism areas. And so, because that's where the satisfying work tends to happen. And so I know that the folks who are drawn to using our models tend to be coaches who are focusing more in those areas. So why would I move my team to Teal? There was a great conversation this morning on James Shore's book club. It was the final episode of the book club, and Tom and Mary Poppendick were there. And they were contrasting different companies that they have worked with that were really performing probably in the optimizing and strengthening zones of the Agile Fluency model, which is more in that. Those would be teams that would be in organizations more in that Teal space. And it was fascinating to hear how Mary and Tom talked about different organizations that were startup organizations or that created architecture within their larger organizations that could be sort of a federation of startups within their organization, and how that made it more likely that everybody's work could be falling into an organization that had those Teal characteristics, although that term didn't come up in that conversation. I have never been a huge, that may be like Hendrik, I've never been a huge fan of this model, but I understand, all models are wrong and some are useful. And so for the folks that find this useful, I think driving for that shift from shareholder to stakeholder is also a part of this journey. Making sure that everyone who is involved has work that is both contributory and satisfying. Anyway, I'll just stop there.
No, I think those are good points. I think that the aspect of, I think all models are sort of like user stories. They're an invitation for a conversation, and some of them might resonate with us and others don't. Rebecca actually said something about wolf packs. She brought that into the comment line about how there are certain attributes of a wolf pack, not particularly the alpha portion of it, but small groups of a small collective of wolves working together in order to survive the survival of the pack. So that's there are attributes there.
That wolf pack metaphor is really off base. If you talk to people who study wolf packs act as families. And the whole alpha male thing, that's totally an anthropomorphic view of what's going on there. And people who want to be in control think wolves are cool, and so they want to characterize what they're doing as a wolf pack. But the alpha and metaphor really should be mom and dad.
Actually, as a mom and dad, I just sit there looking confused most of the time. I don't look like this wolf picture one bit. So let's see. Jorg, what do you have? I'm curious.
Yeah, Diana already saved the wolves because I wanted to say the same thing. They're actually much more social and much more caring than dogs are. So the metaphor doesn't really stick. But in the sense as it meant is in the model, in a really, really life-threatening crisis that is not trained for, like in an army, then I probably want to have a strong wolf pack there to deal with it and make me survive. So there might be situations that are really dire where that makes sense. And my thought on the organization. What I try to do is to make them aware where they are and what they're really looking for. So what is really helping them? So reflect on where are we going? What are we doing? What kind of organization is the right one? Do we want to be family or go even to the teal mode because we have a long perspective? We're playing the never-ending game. Then yes, let's evolve. If we have something that we might just be trying out and maybe even completely killing, might not be the right way to explore it. Might be that we're just in a business that is actually stabilizing, winding down, where we might even have to make hard decisions. So being maybe too much family might be challenging. But the question is, where am I? What kind of situation is it? And exactly like this, even if you are moving in a critical situation to the wolf pack, the intelligent point that we need is to be able to stop and go back. So like you can elect a dictator who has a year to save you from whatever catastrophe, but hold him accountable afterwards, like the Romans did, and not just pick one or the other and then they say, we picked, so now we must deal with it. But keep your freedom to pick again. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. I was just thinking in contrast, and I'm glad we're actually getting to this point where, and Hendrik, I think, set the tone very well in the very beginning of this, which was, and even if I think of the parent metaphor, there's at times that as a parent that I definitely go into mama bear mode. It's like, sort of protectionism of our clan or in our family and those things. The question is, am I aware of it? Am I aware that the fact that right now we are behaving more like an army? Should we be behaving more like a collective here? And so on and so forth. I think part of culture, I guess, is you probably have a little bit of all of this that flows across your organization all the time. And I'm kind of hearing an emergence that's, from this group so far, is that's okay, as long as certain things are kept in check. Let's see, Sheila, how about yourself?
So this is kind of interesting looking at this, and I have to say this is the first time I'm looking at this model. I've never really looked that deep into this model before, but looking at it, I'm thinking of all the different organizations that I have worked with in the past, and the majority of those organizations fall into a very odd category of these, and it's a whole set. A lot of times what I've seen is the entire organization, the higher level and the culture of the organization itself working more like that army that is in there. They're not really getting to that machine area where they understand objectives and run through objectives. But then a lot of times at the lower level, the agility starts to come in because IT teams want to do that. And they wind up doing that machine area first, right? That's that whole, putting in process. And instead of going into the let's be agile and now let's figure out what tools and frameworks could help us in that way, a lot of times what I see is people saying, okay, well, we're going to do this, and putting in, as you were saying, that rigidity and being, tied to the process and not really the mindset. So they're kind of partly army, partly machine, with a little bit of family sprinkle going on in there. And I do see family sprinkling all over, so that's one thing I can say, like that whole family metaphor and some of the definitions of it, I do see sprinkling of that within all these different types of definitions that are in this model. And I also wanted to touch on what Diana had said as far as the Federation of Startups, because several years ago, I had a client who did that, and doing so and having these different areas where each of the products were thought of as their own like lean startup, they were able to be more in that family and Teal Organization, which was kind of cool to see.
Thank you for those comments. David, how about yourself?
So I think it's the creation of balance, right? I think the first person to talk was talking about hit a lot of good points. So you have to adjust to what we have as an organization, what your end product is going to be, how can we deliver value, right? But sometimes when you are in certain organizations, there are very structured, more top-down command and control. It disables creates bottlenecks, right? And it creates that process. There's too many processes that do not allow you to move quick, and therefore you have too many fires, too many of these things. But at the same time, and the contrast of that could be having too much autonomy, not enough vision, and that kind of thing. So I think you just have to have that vision, have that balance, and enable the people to move at a quicker pace, giving them the tools and resources that are needed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, one of the things especially when we get more towards the family model, and it was kind of interesting, like in my household, my youngest son called a family meeting because he wanted to have a discussion about the rules in the house, and specifically wanted to reinforce a few of the rules, of loading the dishwasher. And from a team sense, we go through this ritual all the time, making sure that we kind of reset, sort of harmonious of how we want to go live together as a collective team. And we do in fact have, there is a hierarchy of rules that happens, especially with younger kids, that we also have the parental units. I think that's what they called us one time, parental units. We have some say in some of those things, like, hey, we want to go, we want to light a campfire in the middle of the living room. That's kind of unacceptable from stuff. So anyway, I appreciate your comments on this. Abe, are you there?
Yeah, the company I work for, I will say we company tilts more to the family and living organism kind of organization. The senior management do they pride themselves in having let me say the workforce being conscious of their family, and also the well-being of everyone within the organization is also critical to the company's performance. Most teams are always encouraged to empathize with their team members, to always they always try to be mindful of how they present their cases, and it's, I think, imbibed in the culture of the organization. And majority of the employees are very conscious of nature, conscious of family, conscious of I would say the environment, because the main focus is like taking care of the environment, and also making sure that living organism, let me say, everything that lives is lives in a sustainable way. So hence it reflects in the way we operate. It reflects in the way we engage and interact with one another. Saying that, because we normally deliver digital services to the public and all that, the way that is being delivered is, we have to use maybe project management frameworks or agile ways of working or agile methodology to deliver services. But whilst we are doing that, we are all encouraged to be mindful of one another.
I think that's a beautiful sentiment as well, and not just a sentiment, but it actually sounds like within your company that is a great thing to lead from, and especially I can tell you with companies that I've worked for, the notion that you want your colleagues and your peers to be in a healthy state when they come to work. And I can tell you that the last several companies I've worked for, when times and troubles come into people's lives, and those of us who are a little bit older, as you know, we get parents that go through, as they get older, we have some different responsibilities that come in. And I've yet to hit, at least in my career, the company that says, take care of that on your own time. I've happened to have been lucky enough to fall into companies that say, you know what, go take care of that. We know that the best thing we could do is let you handle that situation, get everything healthy so that you can be fully here with us. So anyway, I really appreciate those comments. Surjit, are you there?
I think the example that I want to share from my end, so we primarily operate in the waterfall model, more of it. But at the same point of time, our organization is really encouraging the team members to go with the agile model. So we have already started one account taking the agile model, and I think both of the model have their own ups and downs. But however, I think with the agile model, we are able to see that, as we all rightly know, we get very timely feedback from the client team. We are able to get wrong in the very early stages and correct that instead of waiting towards the end. So the team is really finding it good to really work in the agile model, so to say. Of course, there has been challenges, and this is where we as leaders come into picture, where we support the team, coach them. Maybe if there are any constraints, we try to resolve that constraints by working with the end clients and give them maybe provide some training to them if that is required at all, so that they can cope up on their work and they can deliver whatever the user stories are assigned to them. So I think that's what I can share from my.
Greatly appreciate that. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just pivot for a very short period of time over to another subject. So with that, thank you for their comments on this. I think we made a nice capping point to this. This actually, I'll be honest with you on this particular subject. I was thinking to myself about how I've seen this model a lot. There's a lot of people who teach it. And I personally do not believe it's a black and white scenario. I think it is in fact that people can be in different stages at the same time. It's very similar to, if you ever look at Cynefin, I can be in multiple areas at the same time. They're not all directly just in one. So it was good to actually have that discussion. Real quick, it looks like Scott, you raised your hand. Scott, what did you have?
Oh, I just wanted to mention an older book that has similar ideas. A gentleman named Lawrence Miller, wrote this many years ago. It was called From Barbarians to Bureaucrats. Now, he was talking about the progression of organizational structure from the point of view of starting out with the person who has the startup mentality. They know what they want. They're the barbarian. They push their idea, they gather people around them. But he talked about the fact that as organizations get bigger and expand, even if they may start out with things and move into family and organic, but as they get bigger and bigger, he said they tended toward bureaucracy ultimately. That there seemed to be a limit where organizations, if they tried to keep everything under one umbrella, it tended toward that. And I've sort of seen that with companies that take on an agile approach, because they start out with frameworks and they buy into a framework because it's got certifications and it's got all that legitimacy associated with that. And they get a lot of benefit out of it. And they may even tend toward, in this model, toward family, maybe even tend toward organic. But at some point, they get stuck in the model. And so they drift back toward being very mechanistic. They don't really know why they're doing some of these things. I certainly have been involved with companies for the last 18 years doing agile type work. And I've run into companies when I've come in after the fact and things haven't been going well. And I find out that none of them ever heard about the agile values and principles. They know this framework and that framework and do these practices. And so they get stuck, I think, in mechanistic quite often because of the fact that their sense of agile was this framework. And then, of course, there are the folks who would say if they decide to change some of these things in the framework, well, then they hear, well, you're not really being agile. You're not doing Scrum. You're not doing Safe right. You're not doing this right. And so they don't know what they're doing then, because they still want to call what they're doing agile, but it doesn't fit the framework. And it also doesn't fit the fact that they don't know what the principles were that underlie the framework. So I'm not sure this model is a direct movement. And like Larry's book was talking about the fact that the movement may even be away from, at some point an organization might be family-like, but as they get bigger and bigger, they lose the ability to manage that way. And so they drop back into being mechanistic, and that can lead to being bureaucratic in their mechanism.
Right. I think that's when you start to hit against Dunbar's number, when you can't possibly know everyone in your company and their names. I mean, I've worked for big Fortune 100, 100,000 or so people companies. And I always find it funny when somebody walks to me in the street and says, do you know Steve so-and-so? And it's like, no, it's not possible.
That happened to me when I worked for the Bell system. I mean, Bell system had offices all over the country and stuff, and people would say, oh, do you know so-and-so? And I go, absolutely not. Oh, well, they work for the Bell system. How come you never run into them? I mean, as if you should run into 100,000 people.
Yeah, it's I'm going to immediately get that email off as soon as I get back to work and say, hey, you're somebody I should know. So let's go ahead and pivot here real quick. And this is meant to be a really fast question and sort of cannonball type of approach of understanding. And we get the measurement question early on in the ACN quite a bit. And I know Hendrik loves questions about measuring Agile within companies. So I'm going to probably pick on you first, Hendrik. The question is, how are you measuring Agile is successful in your company? And just, this is meant to be a sort of a lightning round because we have about 10 minutes left. So let's keep our comments pretty brief. But Hendrik, how are you measuring Agile in your company?
I hate this question.
Well, I knew you haven't been here for a while.
Why do I hate it? Because, first of all, it's not about Agile or not. I mean, measuring agility is a super difficult thing because it's the way your company is responding to change. And this has so many facets that you cannot capture that with a simple measurement. So whatever you try, you might end up in a place you didn't want to, because what gets measured gets managed. And most measurements that I have come across, they were not bringing the attention to something that is helping you to become more agile. Maybe one small example that I have come across, which I found helpful, is to measure the time to feedback. For example, if agility is about absorbing feedback and learning from what just happened, you should maybe measure how long does it take to get feedback. So for example, if you're a programmer, and how long does it take when you write a line of code until you know it's working? Those are maybe things that might help you. But then the time to feedback could be also measured on product managers. You calculated the business case. How long does it take you until you know whether your business case was correct or not? When I ask a question like this to our product managers in our company, they just fall silent. So it's too hairy from my point of view. It's usually it's not fruitful to have this discussion.
Okay, thank you for that. Shauna, how about you?
Yeah, I hate this question too. This is one of the things that if I feel like there isn't certain like some kind of measurement established, though, that it becomes again top down, right? And somebody at some point will say, we must, measure cycle time or this, and we need to keep dashboards of this. And I think that that's very anti to what we're trying to accomplish in terms of self-empowered teams. And so what I find and how I see things are successful is really when similar to that feedback loop, it's like the more that teams are able to really share their work and show it. And, we always, for me, I feel like the demo's one of the most important things, and to do it often, no matter how done something is, because it really stops the questions within the organization of what's happening or where are we or how much more. It really creates that continuous feedback loop across the organization, and it gives people a moment to sort of shine and share what they've been working on. And to me, the more often that we do that is really a measure of success for me, or to see teams moving from status reports to sharing and feedback loops. Like, that's a big measure of success for me.
I love that. Thank you. Let's see, same order. Deanna.
How I would measure that Agile is successful in my company is things like how effectively is the organization learning. And I love, there was an article in a book called Organizational Learning a number of years ago that mostly just talked about archiving knowledge. But there was one article by Elliot Macy that talked about speed to learning. How quickly does information disseminate in your organization? How quickly do you, when somebody gets a good idea or tries a process that's worked effectively for them, how quickly can they share that with other places where that might also be useful? Those kinds of things. I also think that Agile is all about delivering, but it's also about the culture that you're creating, the individuals and interactions over processes and tools, and that part of it. So I would be looking at how easy is it to recruit people for our company? How fast are people leaving our company? What is helping them stay? What is making them go? How is that working for us? What are our turnovers? And how often are we having real conversations with people that are leaving and not just getting lip service back? Do we know, are we surprised by what shows up on Glassdoor, or do we already know what that feedback is going to be? Those kinds of things, I think, if we're creating an environment for success in our organizations, then Agile is successful in our organizations. And so I would look at those kinds of pieces. In the past, I would also look at faster measurements, not quarterly profits, but how quickly are we moving the needle on some of those things that indicate whether we're learning well or not. So I fly in the face, as often happens, of the conventional wisdom about what success is, because I think success is getting delivering things into the hands of those customers in a way that makes everybody want to stay in the organization. That's not how everybody defines success.
Absolutely. Thank you for those comments. Jorg, we have like a minute left. Do you want to just shoot something really quick past everyone?
Just extremely quick. I would look at the business success of the organization, because that's what I'm there for, compared to the overall outside, what's happening, not just making we more money, but what is the market doing. I would look at happiness of people, because that's close to my heart. And then what I look at, if I see a new organization, is always the question, how fast does a critical thing get spoken out and listened to by the people who should be aware? And if this is a week, I'm definitely in a very, very dark place. If this is just mere minutes, then I'm probably in a very good place. And then I look at tendencies much more than actual measurements. What's changing matters, because that gives me a direction and the next possible that I'm going for.
Thank you much for that comment. So everyone, thank you very much. As I've always said, that this is always the high point of my month, to be able to spend time with this group of people. The next live event may be, and I'm going to put a maybe, on September 30th. There might be a notice that the September 30th might be canceled, because I am actually doing my first international travel in, 2 years, whatever it is. So I'll be speaking over at a conference in Hungary in October, but I'm not exactly sure yet what my departure date is. So it might actually be a Friday departure. If that's the case, we're going to have to move the ACN, but we also have some other bumps that are in September. So there might be the possibility, and I'm going to do my best not to have that happen, that we might have to skip September this time. That said, we're definitely going to be meeting after that October 28th. And guess what happens after October 28th? The November ACN, and we don't meet typically in December. So we only have a few, this is hard to believe, we only have a few more episodes before the end of the year. So anyway, I really appreciate everyone's participation. I definitely, Hendrik, Deanna, Jorg, Shauna, you are all the best. Having you all as co-host makes this whole thing possible. Could not do it without you, and very much appreciate all the insights that everyone else also added to the conversation today. Beautiful conversation about this topic today. And with that, I hope you have a tremendous month. This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.